have had a chance to kind of see the way, see some of the different ways it's been handled. I think for me, don't be afraid to put it on there if you, obtained an internship or obtained a spot in a research lab. Definitely list that on your resume. I think that shows a lot of initiative on your part that, you went out, you had this lined up, something that was out of everyone's control happened. So I think at least having it on the resume shows, the willingness to go out there, the drive that you had to go out there. And then you can even, put a comment, like, I'm not sure the best way to phrase it, but you can even say, cut short due to COVID or something like that. But I think having it on there is something you shouldn't hesitate to do. I don't know what the other panelists think.
Any other panelists have thoughts on this?
I would agree with that. I would add to it that, what was your backup and punt plan? How did you spend those hours? Did you volunteer? And that's, if you're in a situation like what Chad described, where it was cut short or something, putting a bullet point underneath there to say, reallocated my time to volunteer at XYZ, whether that's an agricultural life sciences related organization or just something civic or in your community. And also to that, let's say you just missed out the opportunity altogether. There weren't as many internships available in the field for you to even pursue. So maybe because of that, you took a type of job that maybe you don't consider to be in line with your career goals. So you nannied, you tutored, you worked at a fast food restaurant, something of that nature. Don't be afraid to include that on your resume. And COVID, I have been in the job world for a long time. And I remember the days of people having so many experiences that they would only list things that were specific to their career path. But COVID is going to open the door for more of that explanation and building that into your resume and saying, I worked at XYZ and putting some bullet points to say that was due to COVID. And then also cover letters. You can always explain your story. Now, I think a lot of the students on the call this evening are preparing for the career fair where they would be in more a conversational mode with an employer, but I am a strong advocate for, even if they don't ask for a cover letter, including a cover letter, because that is where you have the opportunity to tell more of your story and what was the circumstances without going into, we don't need your whole life story, but that's where you can maybe give some explanation to maybe how COVID impacted where you currently are in the job market.
Yeah. And COVID was a major disruptor for everyone, for your employer, for just globally, that everyone had to pivot at a moment's notice. Mm-hmm. And so even if there's a gap in your resume, if you score that interview, have that conversation. Talk about the things that you learned about yourself during COVID. If you learned that you really enjoy collaborating and working in a team environment, highlight that. If you did self-development online during that period, share that you did that. That don't be afraid to take what you did during the last 18 months and put it out there, because we've all had to grow and develop. If you worked on your family's farm, say that you all had to shift to online class modules. Talk about that experience and how you learned, how you adapted, that your schedule became far more flexible than it would have been in a normal setting. And so talk about how you adapted and what you did. That I think that for years to come, that looking from March 2020 till question mark, that we're all going to have opportunities to tell our story in different ways.
I must agree in the sense that as an interviewer at that point, I do look for gaps in resumes. So when it comes to the timeline, I always ask questions. Well, what were you doing during this certain amount of time? Or where were you at when this happened? I agree with everyone who's spoken so far. Do not take that for granted. It's very important to show that, I was still doing something. I was furthering my research. I'm a field where science never stops, right? Just because you're not doing something actively, science has not stopped. So if you did some research, if you volunteered at food bank, whatever you did, show that you're still being active, because I do always have questions about gaps in your timeline. That's a big button for me as well.
And I would just add to that for me and for Biltmore in general, what students have been able to do with that time that COVID interrupted plans, it's really been a really good measure of versatility in a candidate's ability to understand, because in our line of work, everything we do requires versatility. Every day requires versatility, and so it's given us a really good opportunity to see how obviously uncharted waters for all of us that COVID was, but how did you respond to that adverse situation, overcome it, and make the most out of that situation?
Thank you all. That was great information. And from the career services side, I've heard this question a lot so far this semester and even last year. And I would echo what all of our panelists have said, which is all experience is experience. So don't be afraid to really stand by what you did and put it out there and show that you did something. And if this is also making you think, oh, I didn't really take advantage of that time, or I didn't really capitalize on the break that I might have had, it's not too late to start. We still are in this kind of hybrid world, and there are plenty of virtual opportunities to take advantage of. So if that rang true to anyone while they were speaking, start to think about what some other ways you can take advantage of that are. So our second question is, when it comes to students applying for internships, jobs, throughout the whole application process, how can students speak positively about areas of weakness in their candidacy? And that might be anything from a gap in their work experience to maybe online education was not working for them during COVID, or a lot of the personal and professional stressors that came along with the pandemic maybe affected their academics. So how do you as employers like to see students speak about areas of weakness in their candidacy? And anyone can start with that one.
Well, this is always a topic I speak to students when I go back to Shop Hall. Dr. Hanson and I have teamed up, and I speak to a lot of his students in this area, specifically because I was not the typical AB student. Okay, GPA back then was everything. Okay, I was the BC student. Okay, however, I was the hardest working student in that class, meaning I would stay after class. I would go to office hours. I utilized whatever options were available to help me. And with that being said, I was president of the North Carolina Meat Processors Association. I'm plant man. I've grown into the position that I am now, and meaning GPA is not the end all be all. Okay, I want students to understand that there are other options out there. You don't have to be first in your class to be successful. Although it's important that you learn the information at hand, do not kill yourself in doing so. I mean, I'm probably a little biased when it comes to that, but that rings close to me.
I like it. And I think to follow up on what Chris said too, with these questions, when they come out, I know the way BASF kind of moves that question is, if you were put into a situation that, was kind of new to you or you didn't understand, what did you do about it? So I think for us, if it's an area of weakness, it's one thing to say, hey, this is a weakness of mine. The follow-up question is going to be, well, what did you do to kind of overcome that, or to go around that, or work through that? So I think, having self-awareness of areas that you want to grow, and then B, what did you do for self-improvement? And it could be that the position you're looking for is one that's going to help you grow and stretch you. So if you have a weakness in a certain area, you could say, hey, this job lets me use some of my strengths, but I think that this will be an opportunity for me to stretch and grow. I think it shows you're willing to put yourself out there, and that role may be something that helps you improve on a weakness. So if something like online learning or online meetings has been difficult, I mean, for those folks that are in this call right now, I mean, you're putting yourself out there and you're joining this kind of panel discussion, and you're following up on, a Zoom meeting. So I think the big thing is, if you have a weakness, just be prepared to talk about what you're doing about it, or what your plan is to try to work through that. Because if not, I think that's going to be a follow-up question is, well, what did you do to grow yourself? So be prepared for those type questions, I think.
And practice your response. when someone asks you, what is your weakness, practice your response. Either journal it out, talk it out with your friends, have that answer, and be able to deliver your message confidently. Because the way that you present yourself can be so much more impactful than what you probably even realize. That I can't tell you how many interviews you ask someone, what is your greatest strength? What is your greatest weakness? And they stumble over it. So be prepared, because I don't think I've ever sit on any interview panel or had an interview myself where that wasn't asked in some fashion.
Thanks, y'all, for those insights. I think weakness is always something that is hard to work around, but we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses. So being able to articulate those, and really, I like what Chad said about self-awareness, really understanding who you are and what you bring, and how to make up for things that you feel you might lack. So that was wonderful. Our next question is, and we touched on this a little, but maybe to be more specific, how should students present employers with the skills that they built during the pandemic? Are those things that should just be listed on a resume? What are some other avenues that students might be able to show employers, hey, here's what I did with my time in the pandemic? And then building off of that, what are some skills that you would look for that students have built going into our hybrid world moving forward?
Again, so I'm big on self-motivation, okay? Being self-driven. Here in the COVID-19 era, I mean, a lot of things are going to be emailed to you and expected to be completed and reported back, right? So it takes some self-motivation, some self-accountability. So if you're in a resume, or if you're in an interview, and you can say, okay, well, I took it upon myself to develop an app, or I took it upon myself to start a nonprofit agency. To me, that shows somebody who's self-driven, somebody who wants to do something with their time. If it's not with the company they're looking for, they're going to be doing something self-motivated. I look for that because I don't want to have to micromanage. I have enough people to look after on a daily basis. I need somebody who's going to go out and find a problem and take care of it, versus me coming to them saying, hey, did you see XYZ back there? I need you to go take care of that. I want you to come to me and say, hey, I took care of XYZ. What do you need me to do now? That's what I look for. So.
I think anything that you can either demonstrate in a resume or in a conversation that shows that you didn't just sit at home the whole time. And or even if you did sit at home, you were doing something. You were engaging in some other way. Even if it was you challenged yourself to read more books. Did you read some professional development books? Did you dig into that avenue? And that's something that, you know, if this is the first time that concept has been mentioned to you, you know, look into, so what are 4 or 5 of those professional development books that are most highly recommended for college students? That's probably a search on Amazon that you could do. I could give you some, but there may be some that I'm missing because I'm not as young as you all are anymore. But just somehow that you can demonstrate, it doesn't have to be necessarily work or that you took on an additional task, but just that you engaged yourself in some way, other than just being at home like so many people had to be.
Mm-hmm. But if you were one of those people that didn't do anything during the pandemic, give yourself grace. You can't go back and change that, but you can start developing those skill sets now, to read those books, to start looking at online training and development opportunities. LinkedIn has a lot of free options. There's Coursera that offers free courses too, that some of you may not have had access to Wi-Fi readily when you last spring. And so start looking for options now that people won't ask you for your timeline. It'll be very broad and vague and saying, how did you develop yourself during COVID? And since we're still in it, you still have that opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Beth, for mentioning LinkedIn Learning. I just put 2 links in the chat. If students are interested in professional development opportunities, like what our employers are talking about taking advantage of. I just put 2 of those in there. The first one is LinkedIn Learning through NC State. You do have to log into, because that's a paid service that you have access to for free as an NC State community member. And the second link I put in there is Pack Pros, and that is a professional development workshop through the Career Development Center, where you get a certificate, and you can go to an employer and say, here's my certificate of my professional development during the COVID pandemic or semester. So those are just 2 things that I wanted to highlight in addition to what our panelists shared. Our next question, and this is shifting gears kind of away from the COVID talk into internships and job searching. Apart from having previous work experience with internships or part-time jobs and technical skills, what are other things that you look for in young candidates for internships and entry-level jobs?
I hire for attitude and train for skill, because you cannot do the reverse. Are they coachable?
I could say a whole lot more, but Ashley just nailed it.
No further comment.
I love it. Poster on my wall now.
That's gonna go behind me. I think I need a flag.
Yeah. I need that. That's pretty good. I personally, I'm a football coach too. I coach football. I do way too much, but I look for leadership in sports roles. Okay. Specifically sports, because I coach sports. But I look for people who have been captains of football teams, or who have been leaders outside of the classroom, because to me, gaining the respect of your peers is one of the hardest things to do. Right. So if you can lead a football team in the battle, you can lead a basketball team on the court, I can get a group of green employees around you, and you can take them with the topic and bring them back some good results. So cheerleading captain, football captain, scout leader. I look for things outside of the box, because leaders are hard to train, right? So they're born. That's how I see it. And if you're a leader off the field, or however you see that, I want to talk to you. I need you.
Yeah, and I'll joking aside, just to follow up. It's one of those things, especially if you come through the academic program at NC State, and if you have that bachelor's degree or master's degree, wherever you're at, PhD, like most employers know you went through a very rigorous program of study to get where you are. When we see your degree, we know that you took it seriously, and you went through a very, you have the academic side down, but it is those intangibles that we're looking for. Can we work with you? How trainable are you? For us, a lot of it's a self-motivator. If we have a small team, how long we need someone, almost like Chris said earlier, where we need you to kind of see what needs to be done and to kind of go do it. So really a self-starter, self-motivator is someone, we'll teach you most everything you need to know. I learn on a daily basis with my job. I don't have all the answers by any means. I'm surrounded by people way smarter than I'll ever be, but I'm always learning. And that's the thing, like you'll continue learning. You don't have to know everything, but it is that attitude and the self-motivation you have will really get you far and get your foot in the door to start with, I think.
I like to see outside of classroom experience too. Be involved in the clubs on campus and put that on your resume. That through those experiences, you learn leadership, you learn teamwork, you learn so many things that translate directly to your work environment. So if you're not in a club, CALS has a ton of great organizations that you can get involved with. So find something in your major or something in your passion zone, get plugged in. Not only are you building your resume, you're also building your network. I can't think of how many folks I interact with now professionally that I met through student organizations when I was a student at State.
Absolutely, yeah. And sorry, I'll get off this topic in a second, but yeah, one more thing that Beth brought up is experiences. I mean, the BASF interview is experiential. So it's, tell me about a time this happened. It's not, draw 20 biochemistry structures, even though those still plague me and give me nightmares. But, so it really is experiences. And like Beth said, we just recently hired a gentleman who's graduated his master's from NC State. and he was, in some of the clubs coming through, in like animal science clubs. So he had these experiences. So when we asked him, he's like, he's fresh out of school, so it's not like he's been in the job market for 20 years. But he said, well, in the animal science club, this issue came up, this conflict came up, we had to work through this. So knowing that you had those experiences, those lead directly into it. So yeah, sorry, Beth, to follow up, but you nailed it on that. Just having those experiences will help you so much when it comes to answering these interview questions.
Kyle, I know your organization has previously hired many NC State students, including yourself. Is there anything in particular that you look for in new hires or interns?
I think as all the panelists have said, for us, it's all about attitude and teachability, because obviously every organization that you can work with is going to have their own nuances and ways of doing things and their preference. Things at Biltmore are going to be very different than maybe a traditional farm or setting. So, I definitely, I love for a candidate to come sit in an interview and be open and honest about what they don't know. There is so much I don't know. I love honesty and transparency of this is where I want to learn. That to me is not a weakness. I mean, we're all ignorant to various things to various degrees. I frequently say I'm just ignorant to a lot of things. But the key for me is, are you going to be one of those candidates or employees? If you're going to be one of those people who certainly thinks they know everything right out of the gate, that's not going to be teachable for me. If you understand, and some people know a lot more than others, but for us, the key is approachability, because we're in a guest service type area. Approachability and just overall interpersonal skills is critical for us.
Thank you. Ashley, I think hire for attitude, train for skill is going to be our new tagline in CALS Career Services. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to skip down to a question that was submitted by a student in registration that builds off of this, and that is, what can students do to make them stand out in a recruiting or a hiring process? In addition to like having those experiences that you've talked about, being approachable, having that attitude, what is something that students can do to stand out?
I actually have a story, an applicable experience where a young hire that I was making, it was a college grad, did something that truly changed the trajectory of their course within our pool. So we had been looking for someone who had 5 to 7 years of experience, which I'm sure, Hope, in career services, you hear that a lot from students. Every job opportunity that I look at says, they need 2 to 3 or 5 to 7, and I'm not there. I'm just graduating. And so as the employer, we had that's what we've been pursuing. And there was a person who, a new grad, who was reaching out to us and taking that proactive step to come to us about the job opportunity, and sent a handwritten thank you note with a business card in it. And well, number one, thank you notes are the last of a dying breed. So that's one thing you can do, is send a thank you note. If you have that opportunity to interview with a potential employer, sending that'll set you apart. But we were so convinced that we wanted the 5 to 7. We had not even really been looking at the new grad resumes, but that note came in and obviously caught our attention. And I actually used to give a presentation on this back when I was in the AFA and ag careers that I had. And I had scanned that thank you note in, and I actually show it on a PowerPoint slide. And we gave her an interview. She ended up coming to work for us, and she was with the company for nearly a decade. I could show you a massive portfolio of all these terrific things that she did and some quantifiable numbers of how she helped us succeed, but we would have never looked at her had she not made that personal outreach. And you're not always going to have that opportunity, because timelines sometimes are really fast. Companies post jobs and the next thing you know, they're filled and you've not been able to find a contact maybe to send that to. But if you have that opportunity, that's a great way to set yourself apart.
Great.
I think to build upon some things that were talked about earlier that Beth had mentioned, as far as networking, networking is key. I think networking is everything, but If you have a career path that you're looking for, obviously in CALS, there's tons of organizations that you can be a part of to help grow that network. But look ahead to your career path. We have tons of commodity. Ashley, works for the peanut growers, the Cattlemen's Association. Look to your commodity group to think about how to network to the next level post collegiate career, and that could be pivotal, because if you have network in those bigger organizations, those more statewide commodity organizations, if that network's strong, you're going to come up in conversation, and that's going to be important, and it can make the biggest impact from my point of view.
List your references. Think carefully about who you want to advocate and speak for you, so that when they call, that they're ready to talk you up and sell you, because that's what your references do. By the same token, make sure your references know that that you are listed as a reference for them. If you apply for a job and you list them, make sure they are aware, because there's been several times where I've gotten a cold call to do a reference for someone that I had no idea that he even applied for that job. So make sure that you're doing the steps along the way, because if I had known, I could have talked those folks up so much more than just a random phone call, because I would have been expecting it.
Right. I agree with that. But to piggyback Beth, honestly, the reason I became the plant manager where I'm at now, I listed Dr. Hansen as one of my references. He's actually a big figurehead in the food science department. And I did a lot of work with him, both in the classroom and outside of the classroom. And seeing his name, the processing authority of North Carolina, as a reference for me, was almost a shoe-in. They were calling me before I even closed my computer. They were like, "Oh, wait, Dr. Hansen? He highly recommended you. Who are you? What have you done for him to say that?" And so, with that being said, choosing your references is a very, very important tool. But make sure they know they're going to be called. Those cold calls are not exactly the best when you're not expecting them. I have been on the other end of those, and I was at a football game, and I'm like, "Hello, who's this?" I probably lost the job for that person because I was very unprofessional, because I wasn't expecting the phone call. That's just a polite way to say, "Hey guys, be expect a phone call," But that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, speaking about cold calls, I had a friend when that I went to college with. He was a textiles major, and he had applied for a job with NASA designing astronaut outfits and stuff. He's a lot cooler than I am. And anyway, I got a call one day. He had not mentioned it at all, and I got a call one day from this special agent from the FBI in reference, wanting to know how long I had known this individual. And I was like, what has he done? This is bad. And it was in reference because he'd put me as a reference for the job application and for that level of position with the organization, but I was trying to think if I should even tell him I knew him, because that's what was going on. So it's very important to make sure your references know that they're going to be expecting a phone call.
If that's not proof of why you need to let your references know, I don't know what is. So that's really good advice. Tell your references that they're references, and even better, ask them if they can be references, and we can help you craft that message if that's something that makes you nervous. This was another question that was submitted by a student that is kind of the flip side of that coin we were just talking about. Is there something that you either hear in an interview or see on an application that is an immediate turnoff for a student who is applying for an internship or a position with your organization? Something that immediately makes you go, I don't like it.
So, okay.
No, go ahead, Chris. No.
I've been speaking the whole time. Your turn.
I'll just say, something that's a big turnoff for me is when I'm engaged in conversation with that person in an interview scenario and they have no questions for me. And we get to the end of that interview and I say, "Well, what questions do you have?" And they say, "Nope, I'm good. Thank you." that you can Google. I think I wrote an article about this on agcareers.com. And if you reach out to me, I'll dig it up and send it to you, about how to come up with questions that, even like having a list, so that even if your questions are already answered in the interview, there you got backups. And something, just an easy one to go to is ask that person interviewing you, well, what do you like about your job? Why do you come to work every day? Just, that's a very simple, typically that's not going to be something you exchange in the interview dialogue prior to the end of the conversation. So that's a turnoff for me when you don't have any questions.
I agree. I love being put on my heels in an interview. I love when somebody asks me a question. I'm like, oh, well, okay. You've been engaged, and tells me that you're actually interested in what's going on. Or when you say, hey, Chris, I see you in that YouTube video. You're Captain Brightly. Oh, so you've done some research. Okay. But me personally, the biggest turnoff in my industry, I'm in production, obviously. The biggest turnoff for me is when somebody says, hey, what time will I be off every day? Immediately, I'm like, okay, all right. So I see where this is going. And I say that because I don't have an off time, right? I typically leave when my job's done. And I say that because there's going to be late days. Science has no ending time, right? So if I'm running labs, or if I'm trying to get a certain answer, if I'm trying to get a plate count of a certain amount of bacteria, bacteria doesn't say, hey, I'm 5 o'clock, I'm going to show you how many coliform units I have. It doesn't work like that, right? So when you ask me what time will I be getting off every day, that tells me right there that you may not be the person that I need for this position. Because if you're going to be looking at the clock to determine, what time you need to go home, then yeah, I don't have anything for you. I wish you the best, though. That's just me.
And something that, for me, in a conventional interview, face to face, be early. You get one chance to make that first impression. So be there. Plan for traffic to be bad. If you sit in your car for 30 minutes and you can look over your materials, that's great. Also, find materials online about the organization and learn about it before you show up for the interview. Kind of know what you're looking to do and what the organization you're looking to work for is about. In a virtual interview, make sure you look put together. Make sure that you look like you were walking in for a face-to-face interview. Practice with your Zoom before. Figure out what the lighting needs to be, what all those components are. Make sure your audio is good, because that's still your first impression. And that can go a long ways, especially, I don't know about y'all, virtual world is much harder for me because I don't get that energy and I don't get that engagement. But if you take the effort, it makes a lasting impression, especially in this format.
I agree. And, another part of this, the virtual world, is you really are welcoming people either into your business or your home. So I did mock interviews with some of the horticulture science students earlier this year. And something I told them was like, look, turn your camera on before the meeting and see what's behind you. If you're in your bedroom, make sure things are cleaned up. It's one of those things, because when you're sitting there, if you have a really messy room and your bed's not made up right behind you, again, this was a mock interview, but it's still a situation where that's the first impression. You pay attention to things when you're on a screen versus the cues that you would pick up on in the room. You have to find something to look at. So that's kind of a follow up to the virtual world is, check behind you first before you do anything. Another thing I'd like to say, there's been some buzzwords and things on resumes that have definitely stuck out to the negative over time. I won't list all those, but I would say be prepared to talk about it if it's on your resume. Especially, starting out, I know that you kind of want your resume to be tailored to that job, but make sure if it's on there, you can talk about it. And, we've had like greenhouse jobs posted, and the resume will note greenhouse experience. We'll ask them about it. And it was, well, someone else grew plants, then we use them in the lab. And it's tough if we're hiring for a greenhouse role. And, you almost feel misled when you bring someone in and talk to them. You're like, oh, I thought you did. I thought you physically did this, not that. So I think if you list it, if you do HPLC one time for 20 minutes in a lab, maybe don't put that on your resume as, HPLC proficient. But, it's just something that, we may not ask a single question off the resume. You may ask for a lot of experiences from it, depending on how the interview goes. So just be prepared if you list it.
So for our last 15 minutes, we want to make sure we're getting some other types of questions. I want to switch gears to helping students learn from successful alumni. What were some resources or experiences throughout your time at NC State that helped you find what you wanted to do or led you to your current position? So advice for what current students can take advantage of now.
Well, when I was in undergrad, I don't know if they still do it now, but it was CALS Career Services had a career board, okay? And they would send out emails to students, a part-time job or internships available. And I actually applied for a part-time job to clean up at a production plant overnight. I mean, it was just, hey, get my foot in the door. I can meet somebody up in the front office and I can tell them who I am and I'll take it off from there. Well, I went on that interview and lo and behold, the hiring manager for the quality assurance department walked in and she's like, no, I want you as my intern. You're not cleaning up this plant. You're going to be my intern. So, I mean, look at the draw that I got, drug into that role, but I took the opportunity that was available. Don't be scared to step outside of your comfort zone, because a lot of opportunities will be lying in that gray area that you're scared to walk into. I cannot be more appreciative for that environment that I was in at that time, because I was scared to death. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I'm amongst all these people who have all these doctorate degrees and master's degrees, and here I am with undergrad. I got a test in the morning, and I was scared to death, but I embraced the opportunity, and I was humble enough to accept that I didn't know everything. Teach me. I was willing to do any and everything that was asked of me, because I didn't know. And then once they seen that I was that humble, that I was that hungry to learn, I took off like a rocket, and hence I'm now on the other side. I'm the plant manager now, who gets to call the shot. So just be humble and take every opportunity available, even if it's not exactly what you think you want to do.
I would say something that I did as an undergrad that really helped get me onto my path is I went to professional society meetings with, like, if I was in the agronomy club, they used to travel to the Tri-Societies meeting. I know the Animal Science Club would take a large group to Block and Bridle. Poultry would go to the International Poultry and Processing Expo in Atlanta every year. I was an ag ed major, but we took a group to National FFA, and we also went to, there's a national association of ag educators, and they would take some of the club members to that. And we did things as a club to raise money for those trips. And prior to getting into this role that I'm in now with the peanut growers, I was in organizations where, as a professional, I was at those same meetings. And I noticed there weren't a lot of NC State students. I mean, it kind of got lost. I mean, I don't think a lot of clubs were doing that. And I hope and pray that COVID is the reset for that. So if you are in one of those clubs and organizations and they are not engaging with their professional society or organization on a national level, maybe this can be a call for you to reinstitute that, because I think about my network that I have and how many of us, we went on those trips together as undergrads, and now we know each other in the professional world, and we have those those stories, those memories, but also a lot of us met professionals on those trips who were casually interviewing us or, having conversations with us that led to the careers that a lot of us ended up in, especially for our first job out of college. And so I think that's something, if you're in a major that has something like that and they're already doing it, please take advantage of it. If not, I would love to see that kickstart back up. And even, I was a member of Alpha Zeta, which was a co-ed honors society, and we went to Conclave. That was our national meeting every year, and we took a group to that. So it doesn't have to just be like a professional organization. It can also be in that fraternal world as well.
Yeah, to echo Ashley's point, I think that was the biggest thing for me. And it, for in my scenario, certainly had a lot of interest in the beef production side of things. So going to the state cattlemen's meeting that happens in February every year, stuff like that, where I knew, who Brian Blinson was, the executive director of the Cattlemen's Association, could put him as a reference. Those types of things are important because you can't put the executive director of the Cattlemen's Association on your resume as a reference if you don't know the executive director of the Cattlemen's Association. So you have to make those networks. You have to be proactive in establishing those.
Yeah, and I'd say too, don't be afraid to try new opportunities. If it's something where the first research lab that I worked in NC State was an entomology lab, and it was very outside of my comfort zone from being a microbiology major and studying on that side. But it kind of got me in a lab. It gave me hands-on experience, and then pretty soon after that, I got a contractor position at BASF while I was still an undergrad. Just by having that time in the lab kind of showed that, okay, they can handle this type of work. Let's move them in and try them out here. So another thing too, especially if you go to career fairs or see job postings, don't be afraid to try contract positions as well. A lot of times, that's your foot in the door at some of the other companies and groups and corporations, and look at it both ways. It's your chance to test them out. And especially if you're coming from academia wanting to test out industry, a contract or temporary position is a good way to do it, to see if this is somewhere you want to be or somewhere you're not comfortable in that setting. So don't be afraid to try those things. I was a contractor until after graduation. Then I was already in the building. So when a job posting went live at BASF, I was already there as a contractor. I had a reputation going. It was a known person to interview. So don't be afraid for those, the internships, contract positions, and just putting yourself out there and see what you like and see what you enjoy as well.
No, and Hope, you won't want to hear this, that I was the student that my goal when I got through college was I wanted to go home and farm. That's all I wanted to do. So I did not take advantage of CALS Career Services. I went to block and bridle conventions that Ashley mentioned. I was active in clubs. That what I learned is, because it was right after I got my plans changed. We had a death in the family. My plans completely changed. That before I started my master's program, I started as an intern in the CALS advancement office. And so I started as a student worker there. And that led to, there was a job opening for an administrative assistant. And so I got my foot in the door there and learned about the organization and had opportunities for growth and development. Don't let a job title turn you off from applying if it's an organization that you want to work for. Because if get your foot in the door, like Chad was saying, you're a known entity. When that opportunity for promotion comes, you're the first person they look at and you'll grow. It may take you longer to get where you want to be, but don't be afraid to go in, because it's a great opportunity to learn the organization, learn structures, start building your networks, how things work together without a lot of the pressures of a high title. So don't be afraid to take that path too.
What I heard was you should definitely go to CALS Career Services and take advantage of all the resources that I'm putting in the chat. That's what I heard from that. So thanks all for sharing those. There's so many things that y'all as NC State students have access to that we hope you're taking advantage of. We have hours of appointments that go unfilled every week, where if you have questions that you're thinking of from these employers, like, we can answer those for you in particular, not in general. Like, we can talk about you. So please take advantage of all those professional organizations, clubs, leadership opportunities, as you heard, as well as the professional development resources that we offer through CALS. I think we'll have time for 2 more questions, and switching into the students are here for advice. They want to hear from you. So what advice would you give to students who are pursuing their first internship or looking for that first full-time position post-grad, whether that's December or May or maybe even next year?
Find your passion. Look for a place where career can intersect with passion. It'll never feel like you work a day in your life. That I am so fortunate that I am just as excited to see Monday morning come around as I was Friday afternoon. Think about what that means for you and try to plug yourself into those opportunities.
I often tell students, especially in the realm of your internship, if you're looking for your first internship, to get outside of your your zip code, your area code, and your time zone. Because if there's ever a time to do it, it's now when you're young, and that will help you build your network greatly. I tell the story, my first, not internship, I interned locally. I was trying to intern in the Midwest and nothing panned out. I interned locally, but then my first job opportunity was in the Midwest, and I moved to Iowa, and it sucked. I ugly cried all the way to the Indiana-Illinois border. But I wouldn't trade that for anything now, the experience that I had, and I still go back there regularly and visit. And then I ended up in my second career was very heavily based in the Midwest, and I did a lot of travel. But it's just great to broaden your horizons. And when you can do it for an internship that's only 12, 14 weeks, then, you're probably not going to ugly cry because you see the end in sight, right? So take advantage of it then if you can. But even if it's your first full-time position, don't be afraid, because don't plan for the life that you don't have yet. That's out of Sheryl Sandberg's book, some advice she gives to young women in the professional world. But, don't turn down an opportunity just because something else might happen, because that's a life that you don't have yet.
Great. I actually took the total opposite. I'm born and raised in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I had an internship that was down the road at ConAgra, the Slim Jim plant, that blew up. With that being said, I did, however, take an opportunity that I was not necessarily comfortable with, but I was willing to learn about. So step outside your comfort zone. It's okay. Because when you're learning, these things will come to you. So I strongly advise any opportunity you have, whether it be local or 2-3 states over, take advantage of that. You never know where it may lead you. And as Ashley said, you can't plan for what you don't have. I want my kids to grow up in the South. I want my kids to grow up in the North. Here you are, you're not seeing anybody, no kids in the near future. You don't know where you're going to end up. So take any opportunity you have available.
Any other final pieces of advice about anything related to their students' time at NC State, job search, internship search, life in general? Just any other pieces of advice that maybe you wish you had known when you were in these students' shoes?
I think something I learned, especially in ag, and others have said it before, it's a big industry, but it's a small community. So, I mean, those connections, like we've talked about before, you never know where you'll run into them again, whether it's academia, industry, groups. I mean, the people you meet, you'll know for a long time. So, I mean, just lean on them, learn from them. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Some of the best people I've had in my career, I consider mentors, or people that I just felt comfortable talking to. And like Chris said earlier, I was humble enough to know what I didn't know. And just be willing to reach out and ask questions and find people that are willing to pour into you, because it's irreplaceable what those people can do for you as you move forward in your career, and keep those connections. Reach out and look for accountability. I know the four folks, other panelists here, they keep me in line very, very well. So look for that accountability and find people that you can follow up with and talk to and ask questions and say, hey, I'm thinking this. What do you think about this? Did you do something like that? Did you do this experience? Did you go here? Did you go there? Just lean into folks in the community, and you'll be amazed where you'll probably run into them again somewhere.
For me, Chris kind of alluded to this earlier, and I'm going to probably never be asked to be on a panel again for what I'm about to say, but I do not look at GPA.
No.
I just don't. So, just throwing that out there. I mean, not saying don't go to class tomorrow. Okay. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the network and the community you build is so much more important than whatever that number is on your resume. Or, and if someone doesn't put it, I don't ask for it. But if you graduated, NC State said you were worthy of that degree, that's good enough for me, you know. You know, and if you if you if you know people and on your references they're saying this is the guy, you girl, lady, whatever you want to hire, that means so much more than a GPA for me. Second thing, I'm certainly not far removed from my time at NC State, but the biggest advice I could give you is that I know it's a very stressful time, that it feels like it's high pressure, but make sure you have time to enjoy life as well. Don't make this checklist, well, I have to do this and I have to have this internship and I have to do, that's important things. But the most important thing you can do is to make sure you have a very well-balanced life, that you enjoy life, and that you can be a valuable member to an organization in the future because you have those abilities to have a well-rounded personality. So those are my 2 things.
Build your college family. Surround yourself with folks that build you up, that you can be your authentic best self with. That we need that. And that having that's what kept me in college by and large. So make sure that you have that network. Like Kyle said, make sure that you're having some fun too. This is a one chance that you've got such an opportunity ahead of you. And don't be afraid to just randomly ask someone to have coffee and talk. You may be surprised at how they can help you network somewhere after learning more about you, but learn how to have the face-to-face conversations and don't rely on just this.
I agree with everything that's been said, and I was actually going to make the comment about having what I would call an informational interview or just a networking. Kyle's wife and I actually did that. Whenever she was an undergrad, she reached out to me and just wanted to go to coffee, and it was one of the first undergrads who did that. And then it snowballed. I had a lot more who did it too, and I thought it was a really great way to put yourself out there and to help start building your professional network. But I'm going to make, to echo what everybody else said, but I'm going to make one plug for a technical skill. Excel. I am seeing more and more new grads who don't know basic Excel. And you're maybe sitting there thinking, the Peanut Growers Association, what do they use Excel for? I use Excel every day. I mean, that's how you turn in expenses, especially when you're in a small business that doesn't use like a Concur, like an app type thing. For that, that's how we keep our roster of our members and how many acres of peanuts they grow. And I've just been really baffled at, it's 2021 and so many students. I mean, I'm not looking for you to run a pivot table or do macros or any of that type of stuff, but just basic Excel. So that's my one technical plug to end on today.
Thank you all for that wonderful information. That was, I think, really, really valuable for our students to hear. You hear it from us all the time in professionals, but to really hear it from people who are in your shoes, I think that means a lot. So I want to thank all of our panelists for your time tonight. I know you're all busy, wonderful people, so we really appreciate it. And thanks to Chad and the entire CALS Alumni and Friends Society for helping us put this organization and event on tonight. For students who are still on, I put a ton of stuff in the chat. If you were not able to open all of that right away, we have so many resources that I hope you take advantage of throughout your time here. My email was in the chat as well. If you are looking to get connected with these folks or other great alumni, we can help you do that. Please just reach out. But I will stay on here for a couple extra minutes if anyone has any questions. But thank y'all so much for attending tonight and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.